Yeah, so let's talk about chivalry. The stories in chivalry are taken from epic poetry, handed down from oral tradition. Let's talk about how we should treat things like oral tradition and folktales. Should we discount these things because it's oral tradition and folktales?
No, no more than we should recount written records because they're written at the behest of the winners.
But isn't it more official, though? I mean, can't we generally trust written tradition more than oral tradition?
Not necessarily. It depends upon whose ox is being gored by the person writing the written record. In other words, let's put it this way. You're Vincenzo the Conqueror.
Yeah.
All we know about the wars of Vincenzo are what are written in the official chronicle written by the monk Hieronymus.
Yeah.
And you're a good guy. You're a hero. You're the most wonderful guy that ever lived. But that may not really be the way it was. And so there's a folk tale here in the town of Arcadia about when Vincenzo the Conqueror set the place aflame. Now somehow that never made it into the chronicle. And the picture of Vincenzo the Conqueror laughing hysterically as the children were thrown on the burning barns. Well, did that actually happen either? Yeah. But the point is, if you're an historian, you want to look at both.
Okay. Well, but still oral tradition, I have a cool story to say. In a marketing class in college, the professor wanted to test the telephone effect.
Oh, yes.
I'll never forget this day. There was a really big class. It was like 100 people or so. And so she told the first student at the one end the message. And the message was, Richard went swimming in a pool of yellow jello. That was, and as class continued, that message was passed on, sort of whispered from one person to the next. At the end of class, it got to the last person, and professor asked, so what message did you hear? And the message devolved into your trunk. Through 100 people. From Richard went swimming in a pool of yellow jello to your trunk.
That sounds good.
Well, I think that spoke to the whole oral thing. I mean, there has to be some reservations.
They do, but it doesn't really cover it as much as you think it does. And the reason is that you're dealing with people who come from a literate society and who are used to not exercising their memories. I mean, those of us, for instance, it used to be that, and this is a recent example, there were certain phone numbers you had in your head that were absolutely memorized.
Okay,
Maybe 7 or 8.
That's true.
Maybe 20.
That's true.
You don't do that anymore.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's because you are now dependent on the phone. Well, similarly, in a society where the majority of people are literate, the skill of remembering is lost. Educationally, over the past 60 years, we've gotten away from the sort of rote learning we used to have, where people would memorize poems, where people would memorize the times tables. We've escaped all that.
We don't even do memorizing the times tables anymore?
I don't think so. I know I never did. But that was because
that was the point of pride. It's just what 1993 was for me, and it was like, okay, who can memorize the times table first?
That was 25 years ago. Sorry.
Oh man.
Quarter century.
Gosh.
The wheel of time turns.
I mean, but why wouldn't you have to memorize a times table?
Because you've got a calculator. Why would you not have to remember all the numbers you used to remember? Because you've got a phone. A cell phone that does it for you.
Wow, I mean, that's almost, to me, that's on par with, like, why don't you need to learn how to spell? Well, you have spell checker.
That's coming. And if you look
at the
if you look at the messages you get.
That's true, too.
Yes, it is.
That's awful.
Well, it may be, but it illustrates a principle, and that is that skills that are no longer required are lost. And in a pre-literate population, or a population where most of the people are not literate, the use of memory becomes very, very important. And so, when you look at the artwork in Europe, for instance, All the great cathedrals and churches and so forth were designed for a primarily illiterate population rather. They could read their churches in ways that we have to take long art classes to do, and we can't often enough anyway. One of them went in there, and the church was a book. You could read it. Similarly, in earlier times, just the remembering of long ballads and long poems was a skill carried on by the wisest people. And one of the most glaring examples of this is the Iliad and the Odyssey, those two poems written by Homer.
Yeah.
I always like to joke that the Iliad and the Odyssey were actually written by a different blind Greek poet named Homer, who lived at the same time.
Okay.
But it wasn't by the one you thought it was a different one.
Why?
Just because.
Okay.
It's like the Gospel of St. Matthew was really written by someone else.
Oh, well.
Someone else named Matthew who lived at the same time.
I didn't know they said that about Matthew. I know they say that about John.
I
argued with a priest about that.
Of course you did.
In high school.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
Okay, anyhow.
Don't get me started. Anyway, so the thing is that for a good 400 or 500 years, the Iliad and the Odyssey was strictly oral. They were not written down. And that they were. Well, what happens? In the 19th century, by the 19th century, people no longer believed that Troy had ever existed. Educated opinion said it was a myth. But Heinrich Schliemann, who was a wealthy amateur, but a lover of the Iliad, used the Iliad to find, as a travel marker, to find Troy. And he found the city precisely where Homer had it located.
Where was it?
By the Hellespont in what's now Turkey.
The Hellespont?
Yeah, Asia Minor.
Turkey. Okay, wow.
So he found it. And so all the... They were wrong. They were excited, they'd written a lot about it, they'd yapped, but they were wrong. Similarly, oral tradition, folk memory, had it that the Emperor Constantine had had a palace in the city of Trier, Germany. But by the turn of the century, of the 19th and 20th, intelligent scholarship, for the most part, had discounted this. Then World War II came and Trier was bombed to bits. Oh, and guess what they found when they were digging out?
I wonder.
Ooh. So that doesn't mean that the oral memory of the folk tradition is 100% accurate.
Right.
It doesn't. It does mean, though, that you should never discount it. And you should use it alongside whatever written records you have to try to arrive at the truth of something.